Hello, friends. Today I want to talk to you about Aries energy. We're about to enter Aries season at the Aries Equinox, which happens on March 20th this year. And we also have strong Aries energy already happening because we had Neptune and Saturn were conjunct at the 0 degree of Aries 44 minutes back on February 20th. And that was an ignition point for the new era. And then the equinox will be another one. And we're having a series of periods of awakening, really, of activation. And Aries is very activating. But a lot of times Aries is not well understood. And I think Aries gets a bad rap some of the time, which is understandable. And my sun is in Aries. I actually have 4 activations in Aries. So I'm quite familiar with this energy. So getting us prepared for more Aries energy for the Aries season and all of these different heavenly bodies coming into Aries, I wanted to just pause for a minute and have us unpack this a little bit because I think it'll help us to be prepared and also to know how we can use this energy to our best advantage. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. A few fundamentals about Aries. Aries begins at the equinox in March, which in the northern hemisphere is our spring equinox. And this is the one that for so many of us in the north we're the most familiar with. And so that will definitely be the orientation that I'm using today. And it is the beginning of the astrological wheel and the beginning of the astrological year. So it has this really beginning type of energy. It's very much associated with rebirth, renewal, and resurrection because it is here at this really potent springtime. And it's also associated with like fertility and determination, this energy of this forward momentum energy. If you think about what's happening here in the northern hemisphere in the springtime, right? Depends on where you are, of course, but is that seeds are starting to sprout, and seeds are amazing when they sprout. They have this energy, part of it goes down into this root and part of it goes up, right, towards the sun. So there's this like breaking apart and this whoosh energy that happens. So it's very powerful. It's very strong. It's initiatory energy. It's like getting started kind of energy. And it does have this sense of determination and purposefulness, right? The living world is really powerful and it's completely attuned to both the light that is changing from the sun, right? Depending on the season, and then also the warmth of the air and particularly of the earth. And so that's what signals the seeds to start popping, right? And then we get blossoms. We also associate springtime with a lot of blossoms. And for some of us, spring allergies as well. Aries is a cardinal sign, which means it begins a season, and it's on the world axis. So things that happen at the equinoxes and the solstices, those are all on what's called the world axis in astrology. Are sometimes things appear on the world stage, right? So that's something we'll want to look at when we're getting up to the equinoxes, what might be happening on the world stage. And it's the beginning of the most expansive time of the year. We start the solar year with the winter solstice, right? Where we start to have the days get longer in the north and the nights get shorter. And then by the time we get to the equinox, right, we've got equal day and night all around the world. It's a moment of real unity across the earth. It's pretty great that way. But it's the period between the spring here, equinox, and the summer solstice that the light is getting the brightest and the longest, right? It's really a time of great expansion all the way till we get to the summer solstice, which is an apex like the full moon. And then the days start getting shorter and the nights start getting longer, right? So it's a very expansive time of year. The energy is kind of going, wow, like that, right? It's really, really getting big. And Aries is known as sovereign energy. Leo and Aries are the two signs that are most associated with sovereignty in astrology. And my mother had 5 planets in Aries and my father was a Leo sun. So I grew up with a lot of this kind of sovereign energy, which is no wonder I now wrote a book called Feminine Sovereignty. Yeah, this is my book on feminine sovereignty, and I'll put a link down below where you can go check it out if you want to. I do have a sample if you want to just, get 50 pages and see how it lands for you. So I'll do that. And then, it is available where books are sold. So you can go get my book and learn more about sovereignty. And sovereignty is definitely Aries energy. It's also known as I am, right? It's the I am statement. It's like, I am here. I have landed. I am starting. I am moving things along. I have a friend who's an astrologer who said, we can thank the Aries people in our lives because if we didn't have Aries people, nothing would get done. Nothing would happen. Nothing would get started for sure because Aries is absolutely a starting kind of energy. Now, I will make a note here because I know this really confused me for a very long time. For my generator friends, both pure generators, manifesting generators, and our projectors, you have to watch it out if you have a lot of Aries energy because even though I'm an Aries sun and I have all this Aries energy, I'm still designed to respond. I initiate after I respond. And that lesson has saved me from burnout ever since I learned it. So for my friends out here, look at what type you are in human design and know even if you have a lot of Aries energy, you need to respond or you need to be invited. You want to work with your strategy, definitely. Okay. What I want to highlight here is that Aries is ruled by Mars. So let's unpack Mars a little bit. Mars was known as the god of war, was named such by the Romans. And Mars was also the reputed father of Romulus and Remus, who were the two twins, who were warrior types. And eventually Romulus killed Remus because they disagreed about where they should found Rome. And so Romulus became the founder of Rome. And so there is warrior energy here for sure, but the Romans really accentuated it, making Mars into their god of war and worshiping him as their god of war. And Mars was considered only second to Jupiter in their cosmology, of gods. And so Mars was very, very important to them. His spear is his symbol. So the Romans worshipped Mars not just as the father of their founder, but also as the god of war. And it's a little bit of a development. The Greeks called Ares their god of war. It's spelled a little bit differently. It's Ares. You might know it from the Wonder Woman movies because she's always looking for Eris, right? That's who she's looking for. And she eventually finds him and he is a god of war and she defeats him. But for the Romans, it was Mars. And the Romans really invoked Mars in March because that was the beginning of the military campaigning season. And then they also invoked Mars in October when they were closing their campaigns. So Mars was like who marched with them and they really felt was like their, was their leader and their protector. And it's interesting that they would see Mars in both of those roles, even though we kind of forget about Mars being a protector as well. So Mars is the son of Juno, and Juno gave birth to Mars just on her own. She apparently was impregnated by a magical plant and created Mars. And so Mars is also associated with fertility, with agriculture, with harvest, and the land, right? The earth. And so it's possible for us, I would suggest, that we could start to lean into that aspect of Mars more than the god of war. A couple of things about warrior and warrior energy. Warriors need to be trained. Otherwise, they're just fighters, right? They're just people who fight. But warriors are generally trained. And the best warriors are trained with an awful lot of self-restraint and self-respect and respect for other people. Warriors are not just indiscriminate street fighters. Warriors are not people who, murder and assassinate, right? Which happens in wars. Warriors are actually a proud group of people. Now, my lineage goes back to the Celts, who were warrior people, and they were expansionists. So they expanded their culture, right? But they weren't imperialists the way the Romans were. So the distinction I would make here is that when the Celts expanded, yes, they were a warrior people, but they settled where they went and they lived where they went, and they didn't extract from the people in the land all of their resources and send them back somewhere else, which is how empires work, right? And that's what the Romans did. The Romans expanded all over Northern Europe, and wherever they went, they exploited the people and they extracted from the land, and they really impoverished the people who were there. And then sometimes they did settle, and they brought their generals in and gave them land, but they didn't just do that. They also really impoverished the people who were still there, and often were quite cruel and domineering to them as well. So it's important to make a distinction between people who might be warrior people who like to, they like to fight. Like it's powerful, right? And in the Boudica books by Amanda Scott, who is one of my mentors, the Boudica books were stories about their historical fiction, very highly researched, about the Boudica, who was a warrior queen among the Celts, who managed to keep the Romans off Britain for an entire generation. And eventually the Brits did come. Eventually the Romans did come, and they did invade, and they did take over England for a period of time. Later on, we had the Vikings who came in and took over more of Scotland and Ireland. Again, they were a little more of a warrior people, not so imperialistic. They weren't necessarily impoverishing and extracting and really subordinating the native population. They're more like the Celts in that regard. And then in The Fourfold Way by Angeles Arrien, this is a body of work that she developed by studying indigenous cultures all around the world throughout time. And The Fourfold Way starts with the way of the warrior. And the way of the warrior is to show up and be present. To show up and be present. Not to fight, not to take over, not to be in charge. It's to show up and be present, which is a witness type of energy, not an aggressive type of energy. I find that really interesting. So I know personally I have a lot of warrior energy. My South Node is in Aries, which means I've been a warrior in many lifetimes. And I've been really dismantling my warrior energy as much as I can, because I do not want to embody that anymore. I started to call myself a visionary on an adventure, which is my gate 38 and 28 together. I think of visionary on an adventure. So unpacking the warrior energy is important for me, but other people may feel like they're just stepping into their warrior energy. Like if you haven't had warrior energy, you can pull that up for you. And the way the world is now, you might feel like you need to step into your warrior energy if you want to really push back against totalitarianism and against authoritarianism and against, violence, especially if it's in your environment and you want to be able to stand up and be a voice for people. It is totally possible to stand up and be a spiritual warrior, which is what I think of Mars as in his more awakened state in the human design system, is rather than the god of war, which is really kind of the adolescent expression of Mars. Adolescent, dangerous, untrustworthy, right? Domineering is the spiritual warrior. And what makes someone a warrior, part of it is show up and pay attention. There's this inner strength, right? This inner ability, this resilience, this stamina, this fortitude, this mettle inside that makes you strong and makes you be able to really face difficult situations. The question is what do we do in those difficult situations, right? And the more awakened expression of that is really to show up, pay attention, and see what needs to be done, and the highest expression of this really is being a protector, which is interesting that the Romans, had that as part of the purpose of Mars, although I don't honestly know how much Rome really needed to be protected. It was pretty dominant during the time of its rise, but nonetheless, they considered Mars one of the protectors. And this is a kind of interesting twist on the Roman perspective, because according to this legend of Mars, he impregnated a Vestal virgin who was supposed to be a Vestal virgin, right, of Rhea Salvia, and she then gave birth to Romulus and Remus, which the Romans then said was a divine birth and a divine intervention. It's partly what gave Rome its kind of sense of being divinely ordained, right? But it happened through some sources call it a rape. Other say that she was impregnated while she was asleep. In any event, this didn't sound particularly consensual, right? In our world today, we're looking at how women are being messed with, and then they're not being, or aggressively attacked or whatever, without their consent. And we're really looking at that, right? And so we want to be able to clean that up, right? Clean that up so that we're not leaning into this kind of spiritual warrior energy or this protective energy with that legacy of the abuse of women. So warrior energy needs to be trained because it is powerful. I remember seeing a post on Facebook a while ago, a couple months ago, from an ex-military man, an African-American man in uniform. And he talked about what happens when you put on the uniform. And he talked about the significance of being trained, because he said when you put on that uniform, you have this sense that you are impervious, that you are authoritative, that you are in charge, right? And that you basically get to tell people what to do. There's the sense that comes, you get the uniform, maybe you get the body armor, you get the, the holsters on your waist with your guns, right? And you're like, and he just said, people become dangerous at that moment if they're not well trained, because there's something that happens inside of their psyches where they lose a little bit of track, sometimes of their connection to regular people. And so this is something that warriors really need to have. And I have seen some whistleblowers talking about how the people in the United States who are enforcing so-called immigration laws, I don't really think that's what's happening, but so-called immigration laws, and how they are not trained. They're actually not trained at all, hardly at all. And they're certainly not trained in the way that this particular spiritual warrior, I would call him, was saying. He was like, we have a deep responsibility when we have that uniform on, whatever law enforcement agency you're a part of, we have a responsibility that goes with that uniform, that goes with that level of power, that goes with when the public really says, okay, we trust you to be in charge. And when it's not, it becomes extremely dangerous. And we are seeing this happen. So we can each be a stand that says, no, we're not going to invoke Aries energy or Mars energy in that way. We are going to train ourselves to use our powerful energy for the highest good of all, for the greatest good, right? Not for personal aggrandizement, and not for the power of just a small group of people, and not to just make ourselves feel like, we're in charge, we can make things happen, which of course is, Aries energy can be that, right? It's like, let's go. So this is a potent time and well worth unpacking the different elements and implications. So as we are playing with this Aries energy, as we're stepping into it really strong, we have the opportunity to shift our experience of and our relationship to and our expression of Aries energy and Mars energy. So the invitation for you is to really look at, well, what would you be a warrior for? What would you want to be a protector for? Would it be for ecosystems around where you live because they don't have a voice in human culture? Is that like a waterway or a watershed? Or would it be a particular forest, as an example, where you could be a protector of that? Or would it be for a certain group of people? Or would it be for a group of animals? Or would it be for a particular location? You can just lean into what would you want to, really kind of take a stand for, right? Take a stand and say, I am here to be a spiritual warrior to help protect whatever these things are. This is different than being a rescuer in the victim, perpetrator, rescuer paradigm. It steps out of that into a higher, more elevated energy of being a spiritual warrior. So we want to be aware when we step into our sovereignty, when we claim the I am statement, right? I am here. I'm here to show up. I'm here to start creating this forward momentum energy, that we do that with spiritual warrior energy rather than with rapist, domineering, imperialistic energy. Those two choices could not be more clear, and they absolutely reflect what's going on in our outer world and on the world stage right now. So each one of us has the opportunity to make a choice. What are we going to step into? How are we going to embody it? And what do we want to become a protector for? What do we want to say, this is worth our energy? We want this to thrive. We feel it's an important part of our world. We may want to revive something, because again, this is kind of reviving energy, rebirth energy, renewal energy. Is there something that we want to, kind of bring forth and revive and protect? So these are ways that you can work with these energies and know that you can channel them in a way that's going to be for the highest good and not get caught and pulled down into the really kind of aggressive and violent warrior energy that unfortunately we are seeing in our world right now as well. So get ready for this really expansive time of year when Aries comes in strong on the equinox. And, make some decisions for yourself about how you want to utilize that energy. Because like I said, there's going to be 8 or 9 different heavenly bodies, and I'll come back and talk about those later and what gates they're in human design and all of that. But just to know, this is a really wonderful time for you to be preparing for this, so that when that energy comes, you already know how you're going to dive into it, right? You don't have to figure it out when it comes. All right, my friends, big energy already here, more big energy coming, and I'll be back to you very soon. Yet another view of what's going on in our cosmic world. Many blessings, much love. Bye for now.